Welcome to the Parsons Nose Theater. I'm Lance Davis, the artistic director, and I'm in my backyard. Please get vaccinated. Please get vaccinated so that we can all be in the theater again and we be together. That's what we want more than anything in the world, so please do it. I'd like to talk a little bit about the classics. What are the classics? At Parsons Nose, we take classic productions, and we take plays, and we take stories, and we distill them into recognizable versions that are about 90 minutes long for today's audience. We keep the plots and the characters and the themes and the language of the writers, so that you get to know these classics a little bit better. They're a little bit more digestible, and then you can go see a full production at Ashland or Stratford or wherever. And that's what we do, and we've been doing it for 20 years now. Now, what is a classic? A classic, we feel, there are many definitions, but we feel are plays or works that are over 50 years, 100 years, 500 years, sometimes 1,000 years old if you go to the Romans and the Greeks. And they are works that have stayed with us through the centuries because they still speak to us today. Some mysterious reason, and that reason is that they're about human relations. They're about families, and we're all members of families. We're all fascinated by families. And what a family is happening to a family in the 16th century is we find fascinating when it's the same thing going on with ours. We're still arguing with our parents, and our parents are fighting amongst themselves, and we have a crazy Uncle Ned, the same way as they did in Shakespeare's day and Moliere's day and whatever. To give you a case in point, in the 16th century, in the 1500s, a very popular form of comedy was the Italian Commedia dell'arte. Now, what this was, these were troupes of Italian comedians who would go from town to town, and they would set up in the piazza, and they would perform these little plays. They would go around and find out what the gossip was in the town, and the names of the aristocracy, and the nobility, and find out what little scandals were going on with the priest and with the mayor. And then they would insert those into those little scenarios that they would have, which always had lovers, and always had parents, and always had servants. And so these would be wonderful little stories that one of the characters was Pantalone, who was the grumpy old, quintessentially the one we all know, the grumpy old greedy father. And he loved money more than anything in the world. He was a miser. And at the time, they had a thing called a dowry. A dowry was a little treasure that was saved up and paid by the family of the bride to the groom and his family in order to pay, so supposedly to repay him for the costs of the marriage and the life with the wife thereafter. So, of course, in a comedy, the old man, Pantalone, would not want to pay this dowry for his daughter and do everything he could to get out of it. At the same time, he always had his eye on some young thing who he was either had the hots for, or he wanted her family's dowry. So he was always looking for that. So that was the theme. He was a greedy old fellow who was doing that. In the late 1500s, we find the same thing in a tragic version with Lord Capulet and his relationship with Juliet, who he wants to marry off, remember, to Paris, and to make ties with that family. In the 1660s, we find it with Moliere, and a lot of his plays have the grumpy old character. He even wrote about one called The Miser, with a character's name is Harpagon, who's trying to get his daughter Elise from having to pay a dowry. At the same time, he's trying to marry a young girl named Marianne and get her money. So that's the 1660s. By Dickens' time, we have Scrooge. And you think, well, there's no love interest there, but remember that Scrooge, there's a scene where Belle, who he's in love with as a young man, tells him, I know you won't marry me, Ebenezer, because I don't have a dowry, is that right? And he has to admit that it's true. So it's even going on there, and it ruins the rest of his life, that greed. The same thing happens 100 years later. There's a character named Jack Benny, who was one of the great American comedians, whose whole persona was based on being a miser. That was the gag in all of his work in vaudeville and radio and television. Then we have Scrooge McDuck in animation, same character. The only thing he cares about is money. We have Archie Bunker in All in the Family, who's just a grumpy old fellow who doesn't really care about the young lovers, and his daughter has married Meathead, remember? We have George Jefferson, who only cares about succeeding in the Jeffersons. We have Mr. Krabs in SpongeBob SquarePants, same character, and my personal favorite is Mr. Burns in The Simpsons. All the same character going through hundreds of years, and I'm sure it will go through 100 more. But it gives us a feeling of, oh, we know that character. I've got one in my family who's just like that, and we find that linkage and that wonderful balance through the ages, and that kinship is what brings up a special joy when you delve into these classics and get to know them a little better. For more about us, go to parsonsknowes.org, where you will find more about the theater and also the Parsons Knows Radio Theater, which is our new invention in this COVID year. We're available on iTunes, on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We're also, all 40 episodes so far are at parsonsknowes.org. We hope you listen to them. You can even say, Alexa, play Parsons Knows Radio Theater for our latest episode. So please go check us out, and we hope to see you in the theater soon. God bless.